And one of the biggest things that I want to get to that I know will be a fruitful conversation is, so the Police Board of Commissioners, a police board that was passed by state statute, that was passed by individuals in Jefferson City, end up a few weeks ago passing, or last week, but made the announcement a few weeks ago that they was going to give a raise to their rank and file members, starting at 18%, some, or 16%, some 18, and some 22. With them doing that and eventually voting on that resolution last week, and the mayor voted no, we have to account for not necessarily their raises, because their raises is already accounted for in the budget. If you go back and you watch the actual hearing, they said they already have the funds to account for their raises, but due to parity, we did have to increase and make sure that our fire department also get that same raise. So we was able to account for the fire department by cutting $1 million out of the police judgment account, which they already have funds in their judgment account. This was additional funding that the city gave to the police department for additional funds they may need, but since they already have accounted funds for the judgment, we was able to take, or E&A decided to take away $1 million from the judgment account so that we could pay for our fire department raise increase that we now have to do due to the actions of the police commissioners.
The Board of E&A approved this budget last Thursday in response to changes made by the Board of Police Commissioners last Wednesday, not even 1 week ago. The changes that we're approving today reflect $1 million increase for the fire department, and that sounds great, but it's only because we had to increase police salaries. The commanding officers getting raises of 16 to 22%, larger than any other department gets in this board bill, in this budget. And it is putting us in a position where these are ongoing costs, and we will not be able to repeat this next year. The mayor even stated in the Board of Police Commissioners last week, as they were approving these raises, that this was not sustainable. This would lead to cuts in future years. I find moving this board bill forward today to be very problematic. I am incredibly concerned. This is not the normal process that we follow. It is not a democratic process, as these decisions are being made by an unelected Board of Police Commissioners in silos, away from really any input by the people that it affects, our residents, the people who pay taxes in the city. Here in this country, we operate in government by the consent of the governed. And if we acquiesce to what the Board of Police Commissioners have done at the 11th hour, at the last minute, we are giving up our freedoms, giving up our autonomy, and we are putting ourselves in a position where we will have to make cuts in the future to the departments that serve our residents and our people.
And I think this is where, the alderman from the 9th, I think, made really good points about how this affects the budget going forward. I think that was always going to be an issue because it's 23% year one, and then it will continue to increase until it hits 25% 3 years in.
Yes.
So we were already set up to fail by state control.
Correct.
And I think the majority of the members of this board agree with that. I just wanted to control the state local for exactly this purpose and how it affects us going forward. Today we're talking about this year's budget. How do you feel this year's budget will either set us up for failure or success in the coming years? And is there a concern that you have about what we passed today and any additional changes that need to be made in order to be in a better situation next year?
Yeah, no, I mean, I feel good about this year's budget. I don't like the 23%, but the reality is it's something that is state statute now. It is the law, and we got to follow it, right? And as you say, moving forward, Outside of this year's budget, maybe we'll be saying this for the next 2-3 years, but next year it'll be 24%. Next year it'll be 25%.
Location requirements include primarily tailored setbacks from residential areas and transit stations at 150 feet, 300 feet, at 600 feet for micro, standard, and major data centers, respectively. Area standards address kind of basic height and parking allowances or requirements, avoid proliferation in downtown areas with a sort of spacing requirement, and require some modest ground floor activation in downtown and mixed-use areas. Noise and vibration controls clearly address noise by linking in with the city's noise ordinance, and separately address low-frequency noise through a DBC standard, which is kind of the best available, to our knowledge, standard for measuring low-frequency noise. Building systems and equipment design and screening, some basic green building requirements to mitigate urban heat. These address on-site fuel storage because that has been a specific concern with sort of experience even in St. Louis with some of the existing data centers, and address just some general visual clutter of the equipment that is required for a data center's operation. Site and urban design standards include some general performance-based landscaping requirements, parking placement, and also some basic urban design standards to prevent sort of large windowless new buildings. There's a section about water responsibility, which bans the sole use of evaporative cooling as the cooling system. That is the system that is becoming now notorious for really extensive use of water resources, and for the data centers of the scale that would be appropriate in the city is, to our understanding, not the state of the art anyhow. So this bans that system and allows some flexibility with other more high-tech systems that are evolving. And the section requires some agreements with the water division that would ensure they pay their full share of the impact on water infrastructure. Backup power systems, some regulations here to avoid visual clutter of the backup generators that are kind of necessary for a data center's consistent operation. Also, some regulations to ensure the use of backup generators is limited exclusively to emergency use, such as sort of a grid failure, and to protect air quality by restricting the types of days on which they could be tested, and requiring the highest federal standard for a diesel generator, if that is the generator type. And the final section is the requirement of a public impact agreement for that largest category of data. So this is an additional agreement that would further mitigate the land use impacts and impacts on city infrastructure, and would require Board of Aldermen approval.
Madam President, as referenced in the summary of the board bill, this is an ARPA reappropriation board bill to move money to two places, the Water Division for repair of fire hydrants, and also to the Department of Human Services for food assistance. As we've talked about in the past, there are different ways that ARPA funds can be reappropriated at this time in our involvement with ARPA funds. One of those things is for revenue replacement, which is how the Water Division qualifies to be a recipient of these funds. It's for through revenue loss during the pandemic. And then it can also be into contracts that are still open and within the same. So that is why there is some funds going towards the food assistance as well. There was an open contract that some of what's allowed through ARPA. Some of this money could move to that. So it is for food assistance for folks in the tornado impacted areas, for an open contract that had space to expand and still meet the deadlines that the city has self-imposed as the end of September for having all of the invoices in to make sure that all of the funds can go out the door and that everything is done by the deadline. So that's really important. You'll notice if you have had a chance to look through the fact sheet where all of the different money is coming from, that a lot of these amounts are quite small. Some of them are, the leftover dollars, whether that's a few $100s or even just a few cents from projects that have completed. And then some of the projects for reallocation are quite large. And some of those projects are ones that have been determined by staff that they will not be able to be completed by the deadline, and it is time to reappropriate them and bite the bullet now. We did ask during committee, and we were talking with the mayor's office and the various departments if we think this is the last time a reappropriation bill will happen, and they did not think that it was. I do not know what for future allocations and how that will work, but we are getting down to the wire here. So it is important to do as many of these hard conversations now, and I